Peter Aaron, and Greg Hawkes.
Wow.
It's like folk music. Wow. Well, my question is, we'll talk about the whole band. Maybe some things might be a little Rick-centric just because of the book, but not overly so. So Rick and Ben have been playing together in bands for about almost 8 years before the Cars, and some of them one of them you've been. We'll talk about that. Rick was born in Baltimore, and when he was about 16 or so, his family moved out to Ohio. His dad got a job out there, and that's where he met Benjamin Orr. And they were in a band together in the late 60s called Id Nirvana, and then that mutated into a band called Leatherwood. And then they moved to the Boston area, and they had a band called Milkwood, which is where you came in. And it was in 1972 you met Rick and Ben through doing some session work on the Milkwood record. What was your impression of him, and what else do you remember about that?
Wow. I was asked to play saxophone on a song or two on the Milkwood record. And if you're not familiar with it, the Milkwood group was Rick and Ben and one third guy, Jim Goodkind. And they were like a folk trio and a lot of harmonies. The closest thing I can think of is like Crosby, Stills, and Nash kind of thing, with acoustic guitars and three-part harmony.
And at one point they were in New York City, but at one point they were based in Fleischmann's, which is in the area.
And I didn't even know that I knew that Rick and Ben had worked together in Ohio and around Cleveland. Ben was from Cleveland. I'm not even sure myself whether they actually met in Cleveland or somewhere else.
They met in Columbus. The story goes that Rick had already started Id Nirvana, and Ben wanted to get into booking bands after playing in bands for a while, and he came to see them in Columbus, and that's how they met. Ben was a little bit of a celebrity because he had been in a band in Cleveland called the Grasshoppers, which were sort of the big local Beatles-style band, and they played on the local American Bandstand type show. They had a single that was one of their singles got picked up by Warner Brothers. So that's how they met, and Rick invited him in to join Id Nirvana.
Okay, and so it was this the engineer who was working on the album was a guy named Nick Gamoutsias, who wanted to know if I wanted to come play saxophone for these guys. So I did, and I remember they were all super nice, and Ben was quiet. It seemed like Jim Goodkind was sort of the most vocal even of the three of them when I did the session, and I remember because I sort of did a little saxophone section that was to go along with the guitar solo that he had done. So that was sort of my sort of focus. So he was talking about, the sax parts on the guitar solo. And then I do remember Rick, just sort of being just like quiet, but not enthusiastic, but very sort of,
focused.
Yeah. And so Rick just sort of stayed in touch with me from that point on. And the Milkwood group itself didn't last much longer after their one album came out. It was called How's the Weather on Paramount Records. And it just, they kind of broke up, and then as sort of the next thing I knew, it was down to a duo. It was down to Rick and Ben, and they would play coffee houses around Cambridge, and I'd go see them. And then like I said, Rick's the one who stayed in touch, and then every once in a while, every few months, he would have a new batch of songs that he'd written, and he always seemed to write songs in batches. He had like a vampire schedule for one thing. He always stayed up late till like dawn, and then, but that's when he would write songs, and he would always seemed when he had a new batch of songs, I got another 6 songs. I go, whoa. So I ended up playing on a lot of the demos that the two of them would record, and they were always Rick's songs. And then that eventually led to the formation of another band, which was called Richard and the Rabbits, which I was a member of. It had Rick and Ben, myself, Fuzby, who wrote the foreword.
Fuzby Morse.
Foreword by Fuzby Morse, and I'm still in touch with Fuzby, and a drummer, Ron Riddle, who actually, let me see, where does he live? He lives in upstate New York somewhere, maybe up like Ithaca or something like that.
Okay.
Ithaca, Rochester area. And I think he still lives up around there.
Wow.
And then the Richard and the Rabbits, we played, actually it was named by Jonathan Richmond of the Modern Lovers. Rick had become friends with Jonathan, and
they were the first band he saw when he moved to Boston, and he had been a huge Velvet Underground band.
Yeah,
they reminded him of the Velvet Underground, so he latched on to them.
Yes. And so Rick casually mentioned to Jonathan that, I'm starting a new band. And so Jonathan said, you should call it Richard and the Rabbits. Just sort of, stream of consciousness off the top of his head. So that became the name of the band. And then, like most bands, we were together for, a year and a half. I can't quite remember how long. But basically, we were going nowhere. And that's when I left the band because I was offered a job playing with Martin Mull. Do you know who Martin Mull is? The actor,
Fernwood
comedian.
Tonight.
Fernwood Tonight, Mary Hartman. And he was also a guitar player and songwriter, and put out 7 or 8 albums at least of his own songs. So, and that was the first time I felt like I was a professional musician because I was making $150 a week.
Well, for 1974
and I
whatever.
Thought that was great.
Pretty
Probably 76, something like that. And then Martin decided to let the band go, pursue his acting career, move from the East Coast out to L.A., and then did become an actor. And it seemed like within a year or so, he was on the Mary Hartman show, and then so on.
The rest is history.
Yes.
How about the dynamic between Rick and Ben early on? What do you remember about that? And obviously, that's something that kind of defined the whole vibe of the group. Was they'd had this partnership, and then
I always thought of them just like in those terms, Rick and Ben. It was like, I'm gonna go, go in the studio with Rick and Ben, or it was always the two of them, and I always thought of them as a partnership, and just the way vocally that they work together and interweave their voices together was fascinating, and they just seemed like such a good team.
Well, so Richard and the Rabbits splits up, and then for a brief moment, Rick and Ben have an acoustic duo. There's a little overlap there called Ocasek and Orr.
That's right.
And that's when Rick's birth name is Ocasek. He dropped the T around that time and became Ocasek. And then that led to another band that they started without you, which is called Captain Swing. And that's when Elliot Easton comes into the picture. They had a couple different drummers.
Yeah.
And they had a couple different keyboardists, I think, right? They had.
I know there was one guy, Danny.
Danny, I was going to say,
and
right? That was that mutated into the Cars. Danny Schliffman, who later changed his name to Danny Lewis, who was the keyboardist for Government Mule now, and you replaced Danny after he'd done 3 gigs with the Cars.
That sounds about right.
The first gig you did was, I want to say, March 77 at the Rat.
At the Rat, yeah. My first show with the Cars. It was either February or March, pretty early of 77. And it seems like, because I remember Rick and Ben coming over to our apartment to ask me to join the band, and I hadn't seen them yet. And I think they played me a demo that they had done of Just What I Needed, and I was thinking, wow, that song could be a single. It's like, wow, that's so.
You were right.
So I was, So I joined up, and it seemed like I already knew that Danny was leaving the band, or so
Rick must
otherwise I guess they wouldn't have been asking me. But.
That's how it happened, yeah. So that time, talk a little bit about the Rat. I mean, I know the Cars, you never self-identified as a punk band, but punk was very diverse early on, and you guys were at least fellow travelers or part of that scene, and I have to get my 2 cents in for that, being a punk myself. You guys were playing on bills with DMZ, who David Robinson had played with between the Cars and the Modern Lovers,
with
the Real Kids,
Mono Man.
Yeah, Mono Man, the Real Kids. Who else was? Well, I guess Human Sexual Response was around.
Neighborhoods.
The Neighborhoods, great band. Yeah.
Dave Minahan, right?
Yep. The Nervous Eaters.
Nervous Eaters. Oh yeah.
Yeah. What was it? What was that time to? Did you feel like you were part of something that was new was happening, or were these just other bands that were playing?
It did feel like there was like a Boston scene, and we all played at the Rat because it was really about the only club in town where you could go and not just be expected to play cover songs all night. If you had original music, you could go play at the Rat. And a lot of pretty kind of hardcore bands. The first time the Police came to Boston, they played at the Rat. I remember seeing Talking Heads playing there when they were still a trio. They had Jerry Harrison, hadn't joined the band yet.
Wow.
And
another Modern Lover.
Yeah, that's right, because David and Jerry Harrison were in the Modern Lovers with Jonathan Richman before the Cars and before the Talking Heads.
And the band got signed pretty quickly.
Pretty quick. Considering the other bands that I had been in, that none of them ever got signed. and you hear stories, even the bands that do get signed, you hear stories about, how many years it took them. But like I said, my first show was either February or March of 77. We got signed to Elektra in October. So 10 months, 9 or 10 months, and it really, you could see it happen almost in real time, like
because you had the radio tapes that were getting all this airplay in Boston, and those tapes were showing up in the charts, like the Boston charts for these like national music trade publications. Instead of a label name next to it would just say tape. So all these record labels started looking at Boston. What's this band? They're all the way up in the charts, and they don't even have a record deal.
Yeah. And we had gone into the studio and recorded a bunch of songs, 8 to 10 songs, I think, live to 2-track. So no overdubs, no mixing. It was just get a balance, play the songs live. Here's your stereo tape. Thanks.
Sounds pretty punk rock to me.
And most of those songs ended up being on the first record. Now, see, punk to me at the time always felt a little more. I pictured like like Johnny Rotten and maybe
You guys played with the Dead Boys.
Yeah, and to me, I picture like punk being a little more like kind of thrashy, hardcore,
Sure, yeah.
usually with no keyboards at all.
Right.
And so I always felt like the Cars were contemporaries of Talking Heads, the Police, maybe the Pretenders or something. I think they
B-52s.
B-52s.
Although
yeah.
Kate Pearson, she had a problem with the new wave term. Like, I interviewed her, and she said, "I don't know where that came from. Like, we were
Yeah,
punk."
it seemed like sort of
nebulous.
a catch-all term. I know Rick didn't like. What do you mean new wave? What's the new wave? Yeah. And so, I don't know. So that's sort of who I sort of see the Cars as, coming out.
We're talking about you guys get signed. The first album, you get paired with Roy Thomas Baker. Go to London to record at Air Studios.
Air Studios,
which
George Martin's studio, the producer of the Beatles.
Yeah.
And
That's a heady thing to happen. Right there.
Yeah. And Roy came to see us play, and we had just been signed. Elektra was looking for, to hook us up with a producer. So they had, the Queen records were on Elektra, so they thought, well, we'll use Roy because he had done the Queen records. And so Roy came to see us. It was one of those shows that was, I can't remember quite where it was, but I know it was snowing. There were probably like 20 people or fewer in the crowd.
It was a college out in Western Mass. I'm blanking on the name, right?
Yeah,
but
and
yeah,
I'm not
he
sure.
flew in and the manager had to drive him in his Volkswagen, and it was in the middle of blizzard, and
That's
was
right.
it was real. Yeah.
And we weren't even like set up on the stage. We were like set up in the corner of, a big like gym
Student union or something.
It was like there'd be a stage, but then they'd use it for basketball or something, during the day, and we were in the corner. And then Roy, right after, we were like, oh, this is going to be terrible because nobody's here. But Roy came back and it was like, oh, would you fancy going to London to record an album? And, yeah.
You don't want to hang out in the snow, Western Mass. Wow.
And then, speaking of snow, the time we were there, does anybody remember the blizzard of '78? That's where, if you were in the Cars, you would have been in London during the blizzard of '78 and wouldn't have had to go through that whole thing. I remember Roy coming into the studio and goes, oh, there's a blizzard back where you lot are from, back in Boston. And he's like, ooh.
Wow. It was good. It worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
So how about Rick in the studio, during the recording process? Do you remember, what that was like to be around him?
Yeah. I mean, he was, kind of watching Roy, soaking it all up. I remember we got together I don't know whether it was the night before we started or I think it might have been the night before our first day in the studio, and Rick was sort of going, so Roy, what do you, what are we going to be doing tomorrow? And Roy was like, oh, I just thought we'd be making a record. Very like nonchalant and
very casual.
where Rick was trying to get details like, what are we going to do first?
Well,
And
one of Rick's first production projects that he did, when he started getting into that, was a band from New York called The Fast, early punk band, and the singer from that band, Paul Zone, has talked about how he noticed during the studio session Rick was looking at this notebook, and apparently he'd taken notes of what Roy Thomas Baker was doing when he was making her first album, and was like, okay, this is what we got to do.
yeah, which mics to put on which drum and
stuff like that.
Yeah,
EQ levels and everything. So how did it feel when the first record came out and started hitting? What was that like?
I mean, we didn't know what to expect. I think we all felt it was a really good record when we were done with it. But for me, I thought, well, it'll probably be at least a regional hit around Boston and New England. And we had gone down and played in New York a couple of times. We played at CBGB's at least once, maybe twice, I think. But, and so that would have been a success, in my mind. It's like, wow, and just even at getting it on the radio and stuff. And when you did mention getting it on the radio, I will mention it was Maxanne Satori was the DJ who first played the Cars, and she was the one who played our demo tape on WBCN, and she had the afternoon drive time slot, and she would play it every day. And then listeners started calling up the station, like, would you play that song by the Cars again? And it became like one of their top request items.
I mean, Maxine Sartori is like one of the most indispensable figures in the whole history of the Cars, obviously.
Yeah, she certainly was. I mean, she was such an advocate for the Cars.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about just Rick being such I would say, enigmatic personality. You tell a great story when you were touring for Candio, which is, I don't know, I move around a lot, but that's a lot of times that's my favorite album. But and you guys were playing in Oregon. I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, I think it was maybe Portland, Oregon, and
so Rick had been married. He was married to his second wife when you met
at the time.
Yeah,
of which I didn't know. So I knew that Rick and Suzanne, who he was his wife when I met him, and they had a son, Aaron, who was, if we were on the Candio album, I don't know how old he was.
Four or five.
Okay, yeah. So before the show, we're at the hotel. I'm in the elevator with Rick, and Rick casually mentions, "Oh, my son's coming to the show tonight." So I'm just thinking, I know his son's like 4 or 5. Like, how are they going to work that? And then I'm thinking, okay, I guess airlines have people who put little kids on planes and but it wasn't Aaron at all. It was his son from his first wife, who I didn't know even then that he'd been married before, much less had a kid.
Connie
was his wife's name.
Two kids.
And two kids. Sons, yeah. Well, I found out about the one. I guess it would have been Christopher, the older one, yeah. And I didn't even find out that he had a brother until like a year or two later. And you're in a band with a guy. You see him a lot. You're traveling around. And he never mentions, oh, yeah, I was married before, I have 2 kids, and they're out in the West Coast. And, he just never mentioned it. And I remember when I was talking to Peter, when he was researching this book, he mentioned Rick's wife, Connie. And it occurred to me that until you had mentioned it, I didn't even know her name. So that's how private Rick was with that. And
I mean, you can imagine trying to write a book about this guy. I know one of the most famous people in music history, but yet and still, even something like this, Greg
Yeah.
didn't.
And
didn't know.
I didn't, just didn't know. And then, like I said, it took another year or so before I realized, oh, he had 2 kids with.
Well, another thing that's I think is one of the signature interesting points about the Cars and about Rick is the balance of pop, mass appeal stuff with the avant-garde. Obviously, I mean, well, I'm in touch with your world as an example of like a really interesting.
That's one of my favorites. It's just so quirky.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
song. It's just. It's.
Do you remember
odd.
Lothar and the Hand People? I think of
Oh.
that song Machines. I think of
Wow.
that song.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have to.
Yeah, it's
I have
deep
to-
digging stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did it ever seem like Rick was conflicted about? I mean, he worked with Suicide in the studio and the Bad Brains and Alan Vega soloist Romeo Void. He produced Never Say Never, and also he very experimental stuff that he did on his own. Did it ever seem like he was sort of problematically convicted or conflicted over sort of balancing this?
Yeah, I think the more famous the Cars got, obviously the more famous Rick got, because he was sort of the focal, he was the easiest to recognize, tallest, he had that stylized look, and when he started getting more and more attention, I think he got conflicted about it. I think, on one hand, that's what he'd been striving to do with band after band after band is, make it and, to put it simply, make it and get famous and be a successful, musician. But it seemed like there was something about being recognized that started like rubbing him the wrong way, and I could tell that he would sort of make a point of like avoiding eye contact sometimes if we were like navigating through people or to get from the hotel into the car to go to do the show, and it's almost like he would purposely not see people coming up and go, "Hey Rick, can I have an autograph?" And he would just sort of and also, I don't know, I'm thinking about in particular the song Shake It Up, which I always felt like Rick was a little embarrassed by, because he thought it was, it's like such a simple song, and I think it's something that he wrote really quickly. And
Yeah, I think the lyrics were that the final lyrics were just sort of maybe supposed to be placeholders, and he never came back and finished.
Yeah.
It's very
And-
bubblegummy, but
and-
it fits the mood of the vibe.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great.
Yes.
It's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's and it was a hit for the Cars, but he also wanted to be recognized more in a more artistic. He
Serious
wanted to
arti-
be recognized as a serious artist as opposed to like a pop singer,
Right.
I guess.
Yeah,
And so
So he's one of the few people that was both.
yeah.
Really. And I'm guessing, this is around the time, you were talking about just after Candy-O and Panorama, very experimental album, very influenced by Suicide, who he was working with at the time. This is also around the time where he starts becoming, because of what you were just saying, I guess it has something to do with him sort of retreating into the studio more. He became more interested in really being recording and producing than playing live.
Than performing. Yeah. When with each successive album, it seems like the tours got shorter and shorter, and it was due in a large part to Rick just saying, "Okay, I'm just going to do for this album, I'm just going to tour 2 months, and that's it." And when the summer's over, that's it. I'm gonna think about the next record.
And meanwhile, you guys are becoming one of the biggest bands in the world. You're playing the US Festival to tens of thousands of people and Live Aid and all that, and then Heartbeat City Drive, biggest song, which is, I mean, Rick wrote the song, but it's a Ben sung song. What do you remember, if there was that fuel any tension, or did he have problems?
No, I think as far as like, I don't think there was any tension as far as Ben singing the song. I think Rick was all for that. Let me think about this for a sec. No, during the Heartbeat City record, more of his tension, it got tense with Rick and with Mutt Lange, who was the producer. We did the first 4 records with Roy Thomas Baker, who we loved working with, and he was, we had a good rapport, and I'm not quite sure whether it was totally like Rick thought we should use a different producer just to shake things up, so to speak, or as I've sort of looking back at the chronology, it also happened at a point where Roy took a job with Elektra Records. He became like head of A&R there. So I also have this sneaking feeling that maybe Roy wasn't even going to be available, and that maybe even Roy may have suggested to Rick Mutt Lange's name, and I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure about that. That's just I'm suspicious about it.
Right.
myself.
Well, he was sort of the producer du jour at that time.
The thing that attracted Rick, though, that Rick did like about Mutt was he was a AC/DC fan, and Mutt Lange had produced AC/DC, Back in Black, and Rick loved the guitar sounds and stuff on that record. But when it came to Heartbeat City, Mutt had been doing, he had just had those 2 huge Def Leppard records, Pyromania and those were all done with like sampled drums,
the Fairlight
drums. So that was Mutt's whole approach to that. And for a while, Rick was like, Mutt, why don't we like set up the drums and mic them up, and instead of doing like the Fairlight, and he was kind of badgering them for weeks, really.
Wow.
We were, why don't we set it? And so eventually, he had David set up the drums out in the studio, and like sort of after 3 days of like messing around, he goes, I can't get a sound on these drums. And just went back to the Fairlight, because that's what he was, that was his approach at the time.
Well, talking about Drive, doing the video for Drive is when Rick meets Paulina Porizkova.
Yes.
Well, first of all, what do you remember around that? And then the follow-up question is that, from that is, how did Paulina change Rick?
Wow. I remember. Well, that Heartbeat City record was really also at the dawn of MTV, and I think it was the first video that we did for that album was the You Might Think one, which to this day is still my favorite Cars video, and that's the one where Rick turns into a fly at the end, and it was all very done with a lot of blue screen and a lot of video effects.
It was like cutting edge.
It was, and it did win the very first ever MTV Music Awards for Video of the Year, and I remember the whole band went to the ceremony, and we had been nominated in like 5 or 6 different categories too, like best director, best, I don't know, whatever else. And we kept losing all night. And it's like, okay. And it was mainly Michael Jackson's Thriller that kept winning. So we kind of figured, that's the way this tonight's going. But at the end, for Video of the Year, the Cars snuck in. So.
Which is against, Michael Jackson. Thriller video was an epic, Oh.
And Rocket by Herbie Hancock was another one.
Oh, yeah, that
with
was another,
Godley and which
yeah.
I thought was another great video. All that like stop motion animation.
Yeah, that was a great,
And I can't remember what else was nominated, but for the Drive video, it was actually directed by Timothy Hutton. The actor, and the connection was our manager at the time was Elliot Roberts, and Timothy Hutton was either his neighbor or I think or he might have even become a client of Elliot's.
Okay, yeah, I mean, they were neighbors,
and I don't know whether Elliot really did much as far as getting him movie things or not, but one of the things he did put together was Timothy Hutton wrote up a little storyboard and came in and pitched the idea, and it was his suggestion. He wanted to use Paulina as the
she answered an ad for, they were looking for a female part for the video and everything. So getting back to, I mean, what was that?
And as far as it changed him, I mean, Rick, from that video on, Rick and Paulina were an item. Yeah. And, he was still married at the time with Suzanne, his second wife. And so I
mean, did you, like, personality-wise and the way he sort of was, did it feel like, that there was some sort of tangible
change, not really in his personality, other than I think just Rick was sort of, I don't know, I sort of remember at the time one of the things he was sort of saying to me, because he got an apartment in New York. We were all still living in Boston. We had a studio up there, and he was just sort of saying, "Well, yeah, I'm thinking about moving down to New York," and sort of was like, I feel like I should be traveling in those circles, like from New York to London to L.A., and sort of like, okay, time to move on from Boston.
Right. Okay.
And to me, maybe his relationship with Paulina was sort of more of the same kind of
moving in the same circles or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so after Heartbeat City, you guys Rick starts doing his making solo records, like really around. Well, his first one came out in 82 was.
Yeah, that was even.
Right. So, but he was producing
that
more.
one was done at Synchro in Boston.
Right.
And
that and Shake It Up Shake It Up was the only Cars record that was done at Synchro.
Yeah. We did a lot of demos and pre-production for Heartbeat City there, but then we never. After Shake It Up, we didn't really.
Right.
We didn't do another Cars record there.
Right. So it's about 86 or so that the guys kind of start drifting apart. What do you remember about that time? What do you
Well, I remember the next solo album that he did do was This Side of Paradise, and I actually ended up working on it a lot.
It's 86, that album.
Okay.
Right.
That sounds right. And to me, in my mind, it felt as though that was the real follow-up album to Heartbeat City.
Similar production stuff.
Similar production, a lot of time spent. Did that one at Electric Lady in New York, and actually had a couple of false starts. We tried a couple other producers first, and even did some, started it, I think, with Jimmy Iovine, and Shelley Yakus was engineering.
Wow.
And then that it didn't work out. And then we tried a couple other guys for a couple other songs, and I can't, they they worked with Radiohead, Paul and
Calderi,
Paul.
Sean Slade, and Paul Calderi.
Yes, yes.
Boston guys.
Yes,
Fort Apache Studios.
Yes, Fort Apache.
Yeah.
You're right. And so then we finally ended up working with Chris Hughes, who had produced Tears for Fears, and Everybody Wants to Rule the World and Shout,
And had been one of the drummers in Adam and the Ants.
That's right.
Merrick.
Yeah.
Love it. It's all connected.
Yeah, it is such a small.
So you guys, when you're making the last before the eventual reunion, Door to Door, which I know was a problematic record to make. It was the last one you made before you broke up.
I haven't really personally listened to it since it came out.
There's some songs I like on there. Like the title track is like, I mean, it's a total punker, man. It's a and Tata Weo Weo, which was song you
Tata
guys
Weo
wrote.
Weo was actually an early Cars song.
Right,
That was in our set before the first album. And that one, and I Could Leave or Stay was the other one.
Yeah, which
we used to start our set with sometimes I could Leave or Stay, and those two songs were like old Cars songs that we ended up recording for the Door to Door album. But there was so much sort of bad vibes, frankly, on the Door to Door album. Rick and Ben were not getting along. The other thing that caused tension is that whatever Rick spent months working on This Side of Paradise, it did not do particularly well sales-wise. Ben did a solo record which had that song Stay the Night, which was a
the lace,
and it sold better than Rick's. So that like irked Rick for sure.
It did, yeah. Wow.
So
wow, and so they didn't talk for a long time. Yeah.
And Ben felt like, like he was sort of. I remember, Ben going, talking about Rick on. Oh, so he's a producer now, is he? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, so like, okay, what's he gonna do next? And so there
ruptured relationship between the two of them, and I feel like they, as one, they needed
I know,
each other.
and it's not like I can go back and say, oh yeah, this happened, and ever since it was just sort of a slow, well, maybe not that slow, but a drifting apart until it just cracked. And that last tour, the Door to Door tour, Ben traveled separately. He had a bus of his own, and it was like, okay, I'll see you at the next show. And then the rest of the band, we didn't really travel by bus. We mainly would fly from place to place. And so the rest of the band just traveled like we normally did. And then there would be Ben at sound check at the next show. But then afterwards, he would just take off and see him at the next show.
Well, before Ben passed in 2000, there was a little bit of amends making, as much as there could be, with that video. Which is, I mean, one thing that struck me in that video, I know there was tension between, but it just seemed like everyone in the band was a really nice guy. That's the one thing I got more than anything in that.
About Ben?
About that interview that you did before Ben passed. It really hit home. How did you notice? I mean, I know you didn't see Rick a lot at that time, although you did play on some of his solo stuff here and there. But how did it seem? Did you see any signs of Ben's death affecting him?
Yeah, but it's hard to I was so struck by Ben's appearance myself that I could barely talk at that interview. I was like, wow, you know, I was just stunned. Could barely talk, and it's I can't watch the tape of the interview that we did just because it's, to me, it's just so sad. But I feel like they had a chance to, if not, you
a
know,
little bit at least.
the you know, they had a chance to put their arms around each other. Again at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was nice.
And
I mean,
so,
it was, I'm glad it happened, and the just what they talk about in what you all talk about in the interview is great stuff. Well, Ben passes, then you guys get back together. 2010.
Yeah,
I mean, I know you did the new cars in between.
Yeah.
Which actually, well, just talk about a little bit about the new cars.
Oh, about the new. So the new cars was started out as an attempt to put the cars back together, and to try to get Rick to do it, and he was sort of like, we talked about it for several weeks, just about the idea of it, and if it happened, how it would happen. And so, I don't know, a few months kind of went by, and then finally Rick was just sort of, well, I'm never going to do it. That's, I'm.
He had some
And so,
scatological, like I can't remember what it was, and I wouldn't.
So it was pretty much Elliot Easton was the one who wanted to pursue the idea of some new version of the cars, and Elliot would call me and say, there's lots of other bands who've lost their lead singer and, have had a replacement. And I was really skeptical about it, because losing your lead singer, but you're also losing your lead singer who wrote all the songs. So that's like a big gap to fill. And then how do you, and so then after Elliot came back and said, well, what about Todd Rundgren? And then I was like, wow, you think Todd would do it? And I had been a Todd fan before being in the Cars, and he was like one of my musical heroes. So I thought, wow, if anybody could give that project some credibility, it would be somebody like Todd. And so that's how that came about. And but then we had a lot of bad luck, and it just seemed like the fates were against us. And eventually Elliot broke his elbow or collarbone on the bus. On the bus, he was up walking on the bus, and somebody cut off the bus, so the bus driver slammed on his brakes. Elliot went flying up to the front of the bus, and so that pretty much ended that project. Except for me, the good part was that it started my relationship with Todd, and then I started working in Todd's band, and off and on, and then eventually was the main keyboard guy for his band for like 10 or 15 years, which is even longer than I was in the Cars. and it's right down the street. Because we would rehearse at the Bearsville complex just over in Woodstock. And
so then in 2005, although Ben had passed a few years earlier, Cars get back together.
You mean the 2010?
2010, So 2010.
Yeah, for the
Move Like This.
Move Like This. Okay, with just the four of us. And my feeling about that record in retrospect is that I like it better than Door to Door.
I think it's a great record.
But
Blue Tip, I think is one of the singles. I think that's up there with like anything
Wow,
from the
wow,
first couple
wow.
albums. That is a
Well,
great song.
good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Thanks. The to me it was. We also did a string of shows, really like just like a dozen shows to promote that record, and it just felt like we were just starting to get some momentum going. And it's like, why not do some more shows? It's the record's just getting a little momentum. Yeah, I think Blue Tip was getting some airplay, and then it was sort of after the 14 shows, Rick was like, nope, no more shows, and so it's sort of like just put the brakes on.
Why do you think it was?
Well, in retrospect, what I've have somewhat found out is that he was having medical issues at the time. Again, he'd never mentioned this to anybody in the band, but was having, I don't even know quite what kind of medical issues, but was afraid that he was like going to pass out. He had an iPad for his lyrics so he could remember the words and stuff. And it was just it was just getting started, and then it was like the rug was pulled out.
Yeah. No, it's health related from everything that I could figure out. That he was, he quit smoking for a while, but he was still having a little bit of a hard time.
Yeah, but even though I know that even on that tour that we did, he would sneak off and still have cigarettes when Paulina wasn't around. So
there you go. Yeah. Well, so then you guys, the last time you actually played together was you were being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was 2018.
Yeah.
And
Yikes.
And then Rick passed just a couple months after.
Yeah, a few months,
Almost a year.
Almost
yeah,
a year.
2019, yeah.
But yeah, that was the last time I saw Rick and spoke to him. Was it in Cleveland at the Hall of Fame induction? But what a way to.
Yeah.
I don't know. Somehow I can't think of a better way to end our relationship. From
from Milkwood to that.
Here we are.
Well, two more questions, and then we'll take some from the audience. There's some new unheard Cars music coming up. What can you tell us about that? And
There
time
is
frame?
sometime this year. We're gonna put out. I can't say a whole album's worth, but maybe half an album's worth of material that was a batch of Rick's demos that first I started working on, and then.
What time span are we talking? What years?
They're kind of all over, but some are definitely like early Cars era. There's actually two songs that were recorded right previous to the Cars. I guess it would have fallen under the Ocasek and Orr timeline. I think it was after. Well, I'm not even sure if it was after Captain Swing. Maybe in between Captain Swing and the Cars. I can't really remember. But there's two songs with Ben singing on. So out of, say, maybe the 5 songs that we've got in mind, Ben sings on 2 of them, which is a nice thing.
Yeah, very nice. Wow,
so
that's great. And when should we look for? You said later this year.
Yeah,
Okay.
sometime this year.
All right.
They're nearly ready.
That's great. And you can release them on your own, or is there?
I think so.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the things that hasn't quite been all neatly tied up
Sure.
yet. So.
Yeah. Well, what do you most hope people remember about Rick and Ben and get from the legacy of the music that you've made with the Cars?
Wow. I mean, I'm just amazed at the longevity of the Cars, considering this was when 1978 it was taped. So I was 25 at the time, and I'm 73 now. The fact that there's a book just released, about the Cars 48 years later is like mind-blowing to me. The fact that it's, lasted as long as it has. The thing, I hope people remember, like with Ben, how much he did contribute to the Cars, and his voice, and how many of the hits that it was Ben who sang on, and Just What I Needed, and On Drive, and Let's Go, and All Mixed Up, Moving in Stereo, and
Yeah, I mean,
just
Ric
and
couldn't
he
have
was
done
just
everything.
such a good singer, Ben.
Fantastic, yeah.
And it was like effortless with him. It was like
Yeah, it was
was
mostly
just
like
so
first
good.
take what he did,
Yeah,
right? You were
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
there was something I read where I can't remember what song, where he would just like go in and put his cigarette down, go and do the take of the song, and come out, and the cigarette would still just pick it up, and then go outside and like.
I know. It reminds me of
do
how
it beautifully,
much smoke would be in the studio back then. You
had that
don't think about that these
You had a great
days.
story when Rick produced the Bad Brains Rock for Light album, and the Bad Brains smoked the place up so much that the fire department came. Like
Yeah,
more than once.
This was at Synchro because Rick was producing the Bad
And they're
Brains.
Rastafarian-
They're rolling big spleefs. And they set off the fire alarm, here comes the fire department, okay. And then they, after the fire guys left, they started smoking again. And they had to come back like 2 or 3 hours later.
Well, Daryl, Jennifer, and Dr. No from the Bad Brains are longtime Woodstock residents.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
We should take some questions and
Yeah.
let Katie run the show for that. Thank you so much.
Any questions? Oh, okay.
Go ahead, you're first. Just want to say I got the memo about the Switzerland shirts.
Oh, nice.
And just quickly before I ask my question, and I just wanted to say that if all of rock music were wiped out and I had to recreate one album from memory, I think the first Cars album would be the one I could do the best
Wow.
with. It's just perfect album. Can you just talk about, Rick wrote amazing songs, obviously, but I've read that they came in a little skeletal. So can you talk about what everyone brought to the group? I think all of your parts are so great, and that's what made you just such a great band.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that usually Rick would, at the very first, he would just play a song with his guitar and sing it. And then we'd start adding stuff to it. Or else he would record himself at home on cassette. And it would just be him and his guitar singing, playing the chords and singing it. And really we each brought our own, personality. And like Elliot brought his style of guitar playing, to the band, and Rick's songs were not arranged as such, when he'd present them. And like I said, he did write in batches. So usually when we would have a rehearsal and he would have, okay, here's like 6 or 8 new songs. And we'd all listen and then maybe decide to focus on 3 or 4 of them. And a couple others might just get left off and forgotten about. And some of those songs are on, like, we've tracked down on these old demos.
Awesome. Wow.
So from that era, and then I do know one of the disciplines that I did learn from Rick was Rick, every time, at every rehearsal, Rick would record it on cassette. And then he would go back and listen, and then at the next rehearsal, he might play us, listen to this, what we did. And we'd all be listening. And I used to, hate to go back and listen to rehearsal tapes because all I would hear is the mistakes, and I go, that doesn't sound so good. But it did it helped me simplify my approach because I would listen to our rehearsal songs and I'd hear, okay, I'm playing something here that's not a very focused part yet in the verses. So it occurred to me, maybe I just won't play in the verse and then come in the chorus.
Because you were coming from a bit of a jazz fusion background. And
Yeah, I did have some
Showy
of that.
kind of
And Frank Zappa was a big influence, and like those early Todd albums, not exactly jazz fusion, but very sort of arranged and intricate time signatures and intricate arrangements. So it did help me to simplify my approach and think, okay, I'll just wait and come in on the chorus. And then that makes for the effect when it does come in on the chorus, it's like, oh, something new's been added. And I really learned that arrangement approach from listening to the Beatles, which was on those, Beatles songs where they would have a piano would come in just for do a figure in the choruses, and then it would leave. Or, even their tambourines would come in for the choruses, and then they would disappear in the verse. And I really became aware of how songs were put together and arranged, and how the instruments worked with each other. And I know that Elliot and I built a rapport of working together, and we would kind of be conscious of if somebody's doing a vocal, you might have a little guitar answer after the vocal, and then it's okay, there's going to be a guitar answer, so I won't do anything on keyboards there, or vice versa. It might have a keyboard part, and Elliot would be doing something, to work off of it, or we just left space for each other, just from working it out in rehearsals and things. And also just that, doing that first album with Roy, Roy had a good, ear for, oh, we've got a guitar line here. We don't need a keyboard thing here, or, but Roy's contribution to the sound of the Cars. The first thing I think of is those big multi-tracked voices, when the backing vocals come in for, say, Good Times Roll. Good Times Roll. We've overdubbed it so many times that there's up to 64 voices singing Good Times Roll. And he would send the four of us out to sing Good Times Roll, all in unison. And then we would double that. Then we would triple that. Then we would quadruple it. And then we'd go on to the second harmony. Good times roll. All four of us singing the same part and four more of those. And by the time you get, to 3 or 4 part harmony, it's so thick and big. And otherwise, just the sound of the records. That first record in particular to me, there's something about the studio and the mics, the room we were in. It's still, in my opinion, the best sounding record that the Cars did.
Could you talk a little bit about your approach to the synthesizers? Some of those sounds are very iconic. The Let's Go sound, for example, and Just What I Needed. Were those? Did you just say like, "Hey, here's something good," or did you spend a lot of time working them out?
It was, I didn't really spend a lot of time. It was more like, oh, here's a funny sound, or here's a cool sound. You know, maybe this will fit in with this song. On the Let's Go sound, the bow, 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 I had just gotten a Prophet 5 synthesizer, and it was basically one of the presets. I tweaked it a little bit, but it was basically built in as one of the presets on the synth, but it just fit that line. It's like, wow, it just fit in there somehow. And the other one, the Mini Korg, I still own and I still play. It's the one I was using in the Musikladen show, the one on top. And I always sort of refer to it as the poor man's Mini Moog, because I never did own a Mini Moog, although it was such an iconic synth. But I got this one used, and yeah, I don't know. There's something about that Mini Korg synth, and not very many other keyboard players use it either. So somehow it's become sort of a identified with the Cars sound.
I read a genius description of song "Let's Go," just described as the Beach Boys meets Kraftwerk.
That's, yeah.
I mean, you know,
Two of
how many bands?
two of my favorite bands.
Yeah. And how many bands did something like that?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, Kraftwerk was a big influence for synthesizers. Devo, I love Devo.
Just more of an observation, but Peter, you talked earlier about how everything ties together. And, when you grow up here, the band is like in your DNA. So I think about a supremely gifted songwriter who was, I think, fortunate enough to surround himself with 4 supremely talented musicians, and it became this magic. And I think the Cars, it's a very similar dynamic, and also the fact that the big knock against the Cars when you first came out, they don't, you weren't David Lee Roth, right? You guys, and that was like a big knock, right? Oh, they don't dance around and go crazy.
No splits.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
We didn't talk a lot during this show, and I feel like I talked the most, and I introduced like 2, maybe 3 songs. Ben, I think, introduced 1. Rick didn't say a word.
I mean, that is an analogy that has occurred to me also, was that, Robbie Robertson, the band. I mean, the two, for as great as they were together, the songwriter, they needed each other. And Rick and you guys, very similar vibe.
Yeah, yeah. It's something about just the way that the personalities.
You can see how
Work
busy
together.
everybody is on the stage, but it's all works. Elliot's guitar work and your keyboard work. It's busy, but it's not too flashy. It's all together. Great.
Uh-huh. Thanks. That's we were trying to do that.
You did it.
we meant to do that. But I will talk, mention a couple of things about the show that we just saw, the Musikladen show. It was recorded in Germany. And the night before we taped that show, the German record company guys took us out to this huge, like, beer festival tent, two giant, like, tents the sizes of football fields linked together for this, beer fest. And so basically we had all gotten so drunk the night before. To this day, I don't think I've ever been drunker. David was feeling physically ill. He, on the drive to do the show, he was like starting to look green, and we were all in awful shape, basically. And first we had these big beer steins, like this tall, and then
There's a photo of you guys at that thing.
there's a couple, and Abet Roberts was the photographer who came on that that European tour with her, and I even saw a glimpse of her in one of the audience shots. She's standing up holding the camera, and if you go back and see it again, that was Abet Roberts, and so when we first got to the studio, one of the film crew guys was just taking us in and sort of said, no, don't take any photos. And so then Abet saw that wall of TVs that said Musikladen above it, and she was like, this will be a great backdrop for a shot. So she put us all in front of those screens and started taking shots. And then this guy came over and said, no pictures, no discussion. And that was,
Wow.
it's like, ooh, they're stern.
Wow. Yes. Somehow
And it was
perfect.
like, no
Yeah.
pictures, no discussion. Oh, but to get back to the beer, besides the beer, and then the German record company guys started ordering these trays of shots of apple schnapps. Okay, and none of us drank I really didn't drink at all at the time. And so they bring out, shots of schnapps, and the record company guys are all going, you must have 3 of them. And we're going, okay, but why 3? He goes, because it is good. and that, and then there were, later on another tray came out of it. So it was, I don't know what they were thinking, taking us out and getting us so inebriated before doing a TV show. But there you go. That was
Still
the
laughing
story
about it now.
of the
I'm
cars.
still laughing about it.
So if I may, I just want to say thank you, Greg. A big thank you as a small, bespectacled waif of a boy looking at this cool guy on a record cover. I was like, man, that could happen to me maybe one day.
Wow.
And it was really inspiring. It made me want to play music so badly, and I still to this day do.
Oh, good.
But on the real question I have is, okay, you're saying you were completely inebriated, hungover beyond belief at this show, and yet you guys are still like a freaking machine. So like what? I mean, you played the Rat. Did you play often? Like,
Yeah.
Were you playing a lot? Because you seem like like Springsteen style. You must have played a lot.
We were playing a lot. At this point, it was.
Was it all around Boston or just New England? Or?
We had started, spreading out a little, but it was. Let's see. I guess we'd already done. If it was '78, it seemed like the album came out June of '78, and we toured a lot to
June
support
6th, G-Day.
Okay, and so we opened for a lot of other. We basically played wherever we could.
Right.
Once the album came out, and we would either play in small clubs on our own, or if we got the chance to open for other acts. We opened for Foreigner.
Wow.
We opened for,
What a mix.
I know, some very Sticks. We opened for the Kinks a couple of times early on. Bob Seger, you know.
Right. Paid off.
But and even the Blues Brothers.
Wow. That one I didn't know about.
Yeah,
Wow.
with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. And strangely enough, it reminds me of when we did have synchro sound. One time, it must have been during when we were recording Shake It Up, that era. One time, John Belushi showed up at the studio, right? So, nobody, it was invited him. He just showed up, and it was like unannounced. And
What was he? What kind of state was he in? When?
he was actually. It seemed like the story was he was on his way to the Cape. To Cape Cod, and happened to be in Boston and was looking to kill some time. So somehow he found his way to the car studio. And he
It would
was
happen a
just
lot.
saying-
Like Iggy showed up one time after,
Yeah.
and there was a version of you guys did Fun Time, with Ben singing, and Iggy said, "You sound more like me than me."
Yeah. Yeah. No, Ben did a great vocal on that one. Yeah. And Ben was one of those. Ben could do a great Elvis. Boy,
You can hear that. I mean, the torchy sort of like,
Yeah. I remember there's a song, "Think It Over" on the Shake It Up
Oh,
album.
man. Love that.
And there was one vocal tape where Ben lapsed into doing Elvis. And it was, "Nothing you can do, you wanna stop. Wanna stop."
Wow.
And I think it's still on tape. It's still on the master.
Oh, you had to put it out
So
with this other.
somehow
Yeah.
at Elektra, they should like dig out Ben's
Yeah,
you
well,
know,
that fits
vocal
in with-
outtakes because there's a little bit of Elvis in there.
Well, and with Rick, there's Buddy Holly, so it's kind of,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, maybe this is the last one. There you go.
Hello. I'm from Massachusetts originally, so I just want to give you a shout out from anybody here who grew up in Boston. Woo!
Yay.
Because, like, you probably have been told this by others, but, like, this was part of my childhood, and it is, like, burned into my entire body, into my brain, like, driving down the highway and listening to these songs, and it's gonna be with me till the day I die.
Ah.
And so, just want to let you know that like your music is staying with so many people in this room.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That
I do have a
makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's like and so I have a question about the film though. Looking at the crowd shots, it's hard to tell if they're into it or not.
Yeah,
So
I know.
were they on the radar of the were they fans or were they part of the show or how did that whole thing get worked out?
I'm not quite sure how they assembled the audience. I think they were. I don't know. I don't think it was necessarily an audience of fans. I sort of get the impression it was more like, who are these guys and what are they doing? And
They wander over from the beer tent.
yeah, maybe. It's like, you guys want to go be in the audience for a TV show? Free tickets. I don't know.
Thanks. That one guy in the middle seemed like he was very happy by the end. He was like into it. All right,
Won
thank
him
you very
over.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.